Part 1. The Formation of a Mind. Max Planck's Origins and Early Life. A Birth Amid Order and Thought. Kiel, Duchy of Holstein, the 23rd of April, 1858. On a brisk spring morning in Kiel, a port city nestled by the cold waves of the Baltic Sea, a child was born into a household of intellect and order. The boy was given a grand name, Max Karl Ernst Ludwig Planck, a name that would eventually resonate through the corridors of physics and history. Born into a line of lawyers, theologians, and civil servants, Max Planck's future, it seemed, was destined to follow a noble path, though few could have predicted he would rewrite the very foundations of modern science. His father, Johann Julius Wilhelm Planck, was a law professor at the University of Kiel, a man of rigorous discipline and deep thought. His mother, Emma Patzig, came from an educated and cultured family. The environment Max was born into was one of moral integrity, musical refinement, and academic seriousness. The Planck family valued tradition and intellect above all else. Dinnertime conversations often revolved around law, literature, and theology. There were no televisions or glowing screens-only books, the piano, and disciplined debate. Little Max showed an early brilliance that made him stand out even among his academically gifted siblings. But what made him unique wasn't just intelligence, it was a quiet, relentless curiosity and a deep respect for the order of the universe. Moving to Munich, the crucible of formative learning. In 1867, when Max was 9 years old, the family moved to Munich, where his father took up a new post at the University of Munich. It was a defining transition. The bustling intellectual and cultural atmosphere of Munich introduced young Max to classical music, advanced mathematics, and rigorous schooling at the Maximilians Gymnasium. At the gymnasium, Max proved himself a disciplined and exceptional student. His teachers quickly noted his talent, particularly in mathematics, Latin, and physics. One instructor, Hermann Müller, introduced Max to the conservation of energy, a concept that would later influence his revolutionary ideas about energy quanta. However, Planck was not an outwardly rebellious or flashy prodigy. He was modest and serious, the sort of student who preferred logic to flair, principles to popularity. He learned piano and cello with almost scientific precision and showed early signs of philosophical thinking. He was fascinated not only with how the universe worked, but why it worked the way it did, a choice between music and physics. By the time Max was a teenager, two passions vied for his heart, music and physics. He was a talented pianist and composer. His teachers believed he could become a professional musician. But for Max, music, though beautiful, seemed too interpretive, too dependent on taste and mood. Physics, by contrast, offered something more certainty, order, a glimpse into the eternal laws governing nature. At just 16 years old, Max entered the University of Munich, where he declared his intent to study physics, but what he found there initially disappointed him. The lectures at Munich were uninspired. The professors seemed more concerned with repeating known formulas than questioning the unknown. Nevertheless, Planck endured absorbing, reflecting, always pursuing a deeper understanding. In search of more stimulating instruction, Planck transferred briefly to the University of Berlin, where he attended lectures by two of the most eminent physicists of the day, Hermann von Helmholtz and Gustav Kirchhoff. Though brilliant, they too struck Planck as more focused on what was already known than what remained mysterious. Ironically, Planck's real education came not from his professors, but from reading and thinking on his own. He immersed himself in the principles of thermodynamics, especially the second law, which deals with entropy and the irreversibility of energy flow topics that would play a crucial role in his future theory. The young doctor of physics. In 1879, at age 21, Max Planck received his doctorate from the University of Munich. His dissertation, titled On the Second Law of Thermodynamics, was a rigorous and mathematical exploration of energy efficiency. Though it garnered little attention at the time, it revealed Planck's growing obsession with the nature of energy. Planck's early academic career was slow to take off. He applied for several teaching positions and was often passed over in favor of more outgoing or popular candidates. Many universities thought he was too focused on theory, too rigid in his thinking. But in 1885, his fortunes changed when he was appointed associate professor at the University of Kiel, returning to his birthplace in a professional capacity. His lectures were exacting, often difficult, but always deeply reasoned. Students came to respect him for his fairness and philosophical depth. Unlike other scientists who chased fame or bold claims, Planck pursued truth quietly and methodically, personal life and quiet joys. While Planck's professional life was beginning to stabilize, so too was his personal life. In 1887, he married Marie Merck, the daughter of a Munich banker. The couple would go on to have 4 children: Carl, the twins, Emma and Greet, and Erwin. Their marriage was warm and steady. Planck often played piano at home, sometimes composing melodies for his children. Friends and colleagues noted that Max was intensely private but deeply devoted to his family. His home was a haven of calm, filled with books, music, and a love for nature. He would often retreat to the Alps during summers, where he hiked and read philosophy. His favorite thinkers included Immanuel Kant and Arthur Schopenhauer, and he carried their ideas with him into his understanding of physical laws. Even in these early years, Planck began to form the core of his philosophy. The universe is rational and governed by principles discoverable through reason and discipline. It was this belief that led him down the path toward a revolution in physics. A professor in Berlin, The Rise of a Thinker. In 1889, Planck was appointed as professor of theoretical physics at the University of Berlin, one of the most prestigious positions in German academia. He succeeded Gustav Kirchhoff, his former mentor. It was in Berlin that Planck would lay the foundations of his legacy. He continued his work on thermodynamics, developing equations that described how energy moved and transformed. He refined the entropy function, delved into radiation laws, and collaborated with experimentalists to bridge theory and observation. Throughout the 1890s, Planck immersed himself in the mystery of black-body radiation, a puzzle that confounded physicists for years. Classical physics predicted that energy radiated by a heated body should increase infinitely at high frequencies, a disaster known as the ultraviolet catastrophe. But experiments clearly showed otherwise. Planck was about to change everything. Part 2. The quantum revolution begins. The black body mystery. At the turn of the 20th century, physics appeared to be nearing completion. Newton's classical mechanics, Maxwell's electromagnetism, and the laws of thermodynamics had seemingly answered most of nature's questions. Many scientists believed there was little left to discover, but beneath this apparent perfection lay a troubling anomalized problem of black body radiation. A black body is an idealized physical body that absorbs all electromagnetic radiation and re-emits it based solely on its temperature. Experimental physicists had measured the radiation emitted by such bodies at various temperatures, and they consistently found something that classical theory couldn't explain. According to the Rayleigh-Jeans law, based on classical assumptions, the intensity of radiation should increase without bound at shorter wavelengths, a result that implied an infinite amount of energy. This nonsensical prediction was dubbed the ultraviolet catastrophe. Max Planck had long been interested in the laws of thermodynamics and how energy moved through systems. The black-body problem gnawed at him not only because it was unsolved, but because it challenged the logical consistency of known physics. In a lecture to the German Physical Society in 1899, Planck stated plainly, "My unshakable belief is that energy is continuous. I will not resort to discontinuities unless absolutely necessary." Ironically, it was this very belief that would lead him to uncover a discontinuity more profound than any physicist had yet imagined. A desperate assumption. In 1900, Planck analyzed experimental blackbody radiation data obtained by Heinrich Rubens and Ferdinand Kurlbaum. The results, precise and consistent, didn't match any known theory. Planck tried every mathematical trick he knew, known law of thermodynamics, every piece of calculus to derive a function that would fit the observed data, but classical mechanics failed. Finally, in what he later called an act of desperation, Planck made a bold assumption: energy is not emitted continuously, but in discrete packets. He introduced a new constant into his equations, now known as the Planck constant, and derived a formula that matched the blackbody radiation spectrum perfectly, 等于77, where E is the energy of a quantum, H is Planck's constant, 6.626, appearance W-Js, F is the frequency of the radiation. Planck didn't fully understand the implications of his equation at the time. He regarded it as a mathematical trick, not a revelation. He was still attached to the idea of continuity in nature. But the physics world would never be the same again. Reception and resistance. Planck presented his findings on the 14th of December, 1900, to the German Physical Society. It was a quiet presentation, understated and cautious. There was no announcement of a revolution or thunderous applause. But history would later mark this date as the birth of quantum theory. Many physicists, including Planck himself, were skeptical. After all, the idea that energy came in packets rather than being continuous went against centuries of scientific thinking. It seemed unnatural, almost heretical. Planck's equation worked, there was no denying that. But was it merely a mathematical convenience, or did it reflect something deeper about the universe? For several years, Planck wrestled with this question. He continued refining his theory, testing its limits, exploring its implications. Still, he did not fully embrace the notion of quantization as a physical reality. Ironically, it would take a younger physicist far more radical to grasp the full significance of Planck's discovery. Einstein picks up the torch. In 1905, Albert Einstein, then a young patent clerk in Switzerland, published a paper proposing that light itself consists of quanta later called photons. He used this idea to explain the photoelectric effect in which light hitting a metal surface causes the ejection of electrons. Einstein built directly on Planck's formula, arguing that light energy must come in discrete units. It was a bold, revolutionary idea, and it challenged the very foundations of classical wave theory. At first, Planck resisted. He admired Einstein's brilliance but found his conclusions unsettling. To Planck, the quantization of matter seemed plausible, but of radiation? Of light? That went too far. But as experimental evidence continued to mount, Planck gradually acknowledged the truth. His own equation had pointed to a new and fundamental reality. Energy was not continuous, it was granular. The Nobel Prize and global recognition. By 1918, Planck's role as the originator of quantum theory was undeniable. His work had laid the foundation for a complete rethinking of matter, energy, and the microscopic universe. That year, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics, not for a specific experiment, but for a concept that had shaken the world of science to its core. In his acceptance speech, Planck reflected on the deep mysteries of nature and the path of scientific discovery. Science progresses not by the destruction of the old, but by building upon it. What I have done is only possible because of the giants who came before me. Planck was never a revolutionary in personality, but his theory sparked the most revolutionary transformation physics had ever seen. Quantum ripples across the world. Planck's discovery did not stand alone for long. Within 2 decades, quantum theory blossomed into a full-blown revolution. Niels Bohr used quantum principles to explain atomic structure. Werner Heisenberg formulated the uncertainty principle. Erwin Schrödinger developed wave mechanics. Paul Dirac extended quantum mechanics into the realm of relativistic particles. Together, they built a new vision of reality, a world where particles could behave like waves, where certainty was replaced by probability, where observation influenced outcomes. Planck's modest quanta had opened the door to a new universe. But for Planck himself, the discovery was never about glory or fame. It was about truth and the quiet, disciplined pursuit of nature's eternal laws. Part 3. War, Tragedy, and Conscience. The calm before the storm, Planck and the German Empire. As the early 20th century unfolded, Max Planck was at the peak of his professional career. By the 1910s, he was internationally recognized as one of Germany's most eminent physicists. At the University of Berlin, he served not only as a professor but as a pillar of academic integrity, mentoring students, publishing influential papers, and presiding over the Prussian Academy of Sciences. Planck was admired not just for his brilliance, but for his composure and humility. His Berlin lectures attracted students from across Europe, including future stars of physics. His office was a sanctuary for rational dialogue and mathematical elegance. But in 1914, the stability of Europe collapsed into World War I, and Planck, like many intellectuals of the time, was drawn into the conflict not as a soldier, but as a citizen of conscience. National loyalty and scientific responsibility. Planck initially supported Germany's entry into World War I, as did many of his colleagues. Patriotism ran deep among the academic class. Alongside other leading scientists, Planck signed the controversial Manifesto of the 93, a declaration defending Germany's military actions, including the invasion of Belgium. But his support was cautious. He viewed the war not as a celebration of violence, but as a moral necessity to protect the homeland. Still, he was disturbed by the division it caused among scientists, severing international collaborations and sowing mistrust. Despite the war, Planck continued his research and administrative duties. He organized humanitarian efforts for displaced academics and helped sustain scientific discourse even in a time of chaos. His position was one of measured loyalty, striving to serve Germany without compromising science. But the war would soon touch Planck's life in a much deeper, more devastating way: the loss of a son, Karl Planck. In 1916, tragedy struck Max Planck's family. His eldest son, Karl, was killed in action on the battlefield during World War I. He was only 22 years old. Planck, a man who had once embraced the orderly logic of the universe, now faced a reality that no equation could balance. Karl's death changed him. Friends noted a deepening in Planck's tonea, quiet sorrow in his writings, and a reflective distance in his eyes. Yet he did not collapse under grief. Instead, he turned inward, seeking solace in music, long walks, and continued study. He wrote in his diary, "The pain never leaves. One does not recover from such a loss, endures it." The war would end in 1918, with Germany defeated and humiliated. Planck, now a Nobel laureate, returned to a country scarred by economic despair, political extremism, and cultural uncertainty. A fractured Germany, a fractured world. The 1920s brought the Weimar Republic, and with it a volatile mix of democracy, inflation, art, and ideological struggle. Germany's scientific community, though battered, began to revive. Quantum mechanics blossomed, and Planck continued to serve as a senior statesman of science. He worked to rebuild Germany's scientific credibility and to reconnect with physicists abroad. He corresponded with Einstein, supported Heisenberg, and helped found institutions that would define modern physics. But Germany itself was unstable. Hyperinflation decimated the middle class. Extremist parties left and right battled for control of the streets. And in the midst of it all, Planck, now in his 60s, maintained a stoic presence, trying to protect academic institutions from the encroachment of politics. The rise of Hitler, a moral quagmire. In 1933, Adolf Hitler came to power. For Planck, now a revered figure and president of the Kaiser Wilhelm Society, a prestigious scientific research institution, this was the beginning of a moral trial unlike any he had ever faced. Hitler's regime demanded loyalty, purged Jewish scientists from universities, and imposed ideological control over academia. Planck was horrified but cautious. He believed in working from within. Unlike some who fled, Planck tried to persuade Nazi officials to protect science. He made private appeals to retain Jewish colleagues like Fritz Haber, the chemist who had served Germany in WWI, but was now forced to resign because of his heritage. In a meeting with Hitler himself, Planck reportedly pleaded for tolerance in the scientific community. Hitler dismissed him coldly. The dictator saw science not as truth, but as a tool of ideology. Planck was deeply shaken. He had believed that reason could prevail. Now reason itself was under siege. More personal loss, Greet, Emma, and Marie. As political pressures mounted, Planck's personal life continued to unravel in heartbreak. In 1909, his beloved first wife, Marie, died from tuberculosis. Her death left Planck devastated. He later married her cousin, Marga von Hoesslin, and had another child. But tragedy struck again. His twin daughters, Emma and Greet, both died in childbirth, Emma in 1919 and Greet in 1917. His second son, Erwin, would later face a much more terrible fate. Planck, now in his 70s, had buried his wife, 3 children, and watched his country descend into totalitarianism. And yet, he continued to teach, write, and protect the integrity of German science wherever he could. The ultimate loss, Erwin Planck and the plot against Hitler. In 1944, Planck's final surviving son, Erwin Planck, became involved in the 20th of July plot, a failed attempt to assassinate Adolf Hitler and overthrow the Nazi regime. The conspirators, including Klaus von Stauffenberg, were caught, tortured, and executed. Erwin was arrested, tried, and sentenced to death. Despite Max Planck's fame and pleas for clemency, the regime was unyielding. Erwin Planck was executed by hanging in January 1945. For Max Planck, this was the deepest cut of all. The father of quantum theory, the man who had unlocked the secrets of atomic energy now, faced his final years in a country shattered by war and ruled by those who had killed his son. The end of war and the final days. Berlin was in ruins. The universities were bombed. The Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, once a beacon of scientific excellence, was barely functioning. Planck, now 87 years old, was evacuated by American troops to Göttingen, where he spent his final months. He lived quietly, surrounded by surviving students and colleagues. On October 4, 1947, Max Planck died in Göttingen. His death marked the end of an eratha passing of a man who had bridged the 19th and 20th centuries, who had discovered the seeds of quantum mechanics, and who had lived through the darkest chapters of modern history. Part 4, Legacy and the New Age of Physics. From quiet genius to founding father, when Max Planck died in 1947, the world of physics was already surging ahead on a wave he had helped unleash. Yet despite his central role in initiating the quantum revolution, Planck remained a figure of quiet modesty in a field increasingly defined by bold theorists and daring interpretations. Historians, physicists, and philosophers have since come to recognize what his contemporaries sometimes missed. Max Planck was not merely the mathematician who solved a specific problem in blackbody radiation. He was the intellectual father of quantum theory, whose insights redefined our understanding of energy, matter, and reality itself. Planck's work had cracked open the classical shell of 19th century physics, revealing an entirely new framework beneath that would give rise to atomic physics, nuclear energy, quantum mechanics, and, ultimately, the information age. The foundations of modern physics. Planck's introduction of the quantum was the first domino in a long sequence of theoretical revolutions. Though he was initially reluctant to accept the full implications of his own discovery, later scientists would follow his trail and build a framework so robust it remains the backbone of modern physics. Here's how Planck's ideas became foundational. Energy quantization. Planck's formula introduced the idea that energy is not continuous but comes in discrete packets, quanta. This overturned classical physics and created the foundation for all quantum mechanics. Planck constant H. The constant became one of the most fundamental physical constants. It appears in Schrödinger's equation, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, and every expression involving quantized systems. Planck units. By combining the gravitational constant, g, and the speed of light, c, scientists developed Planck-Unitz's set of natural measurements believed to be the limits of the known universe. These include Planck length, 1,610 meters. Planck time, 5.4×10 seconds. Planck energy, 1.2 Prince die dot Jevis. In a very real sense, Planck provided physicists with the first tools to probe beyond space-time into the realms of the ultra-small and the early universe. Planck's influence on the great minds. Max Planck's intellectual legacy can also be measured by the giants who stood on his shoulders. Albert Einstein frequently credited Planck as the starting point for his own breakthroughs. Einstein's 1905 paper on the photoelectric effect, often called one of the seeds of quantum mechanics, directly cited Planck's constant. Niels Bohr's atomic model was only possible thanks to Planck's concept of energy levels. Werner Heisenberg, Erwin Schrödinger, and Paul Dirac took Planck's concept of energy quantization and built an entirely new mechanics from itone that ultimately led to the standard model of particle physics. Richard Feynman once said, "If Planck had not done what he did, someone else would have. But it's always the first man through the wall who gets bloodied." That was Planck. Planck's name appears in nearly every physics textbook in the world. His influence is unshakable. He is the cornerstone upon which modern physics stands. Ethical scientist, ethical legacy. Beyond equations and experiments, Planck's legacy is also philosophical and ethical. He lived through the collapse of an empire, the rise of fascism, 2 world wars, and the execution of his own son by a totalitarian regime. Through it all, Planck remained committed to the principles of intellectual honesty, humility, and human dignity. He once wrote, "Science cannot solve the ultimate mystery of nature, and that is because we ourselves are a part of nature and therefore a part of the mystery that we are trying to solve." This duality of being both observer and participant would later become a central tenet in quantum theory, where observation itself can influence outcomes. Planck believed in the moral duty of the scientist. He opposed the politicization of science and used his influence to support persecuted colleagues whenever he could, even under personal risk. His enduring message was simple: science is a search for truth, not for power. The Max Planck Society, an institution of excellence. After World War II, as Germany sought to rebuild its academic and moral foundation, scientists and administrators agreed that a new institution was needed, one that would foster independent research and uphold the highest standards of scientific integrity. In 1948, 1 year after Planck's death, the Max Planck Society for the Advancement of Science, Max Planck Gesellschaft, was founded in his honor. It replaced the Kaiser Wilhelm Society, which had been tarnished by association with the Nazi regime, and became a global model for research excellence. Today, the Max Planck Society operates over 80 research institutes across Germany and the world, employing thousands of scientists in fields from molecular biology to astrophysics, robotics to psychology, and more. Its mission is one that Planck would have embraced: to enable free, curiosity-driven research with no interference from political or corporate agendas, honoring the name in science and beyond. Max Planck's name is more than historicalities operational. It appears in equations, experiments, and the very terminology of physics. Planck Satellite. Launched in 2009 by the European Space Agency, it mapped the cosmic microwave background radiation in unprecedented detail, helping scientists study the origins of the universe. The mission was named in Planck's honor, recognizing his influence on cosmology and thermodynamics. Planck Epoch. In cosmology, the first 10 seconds after the Big Bang is known as the Planck epoch time, so extreme that all known laws of physics break down. This is the ultimate frontier, the before of time, and it bears his name. Planck units continue to be used in cutting-edge theoretical physics to probe questions at the intersection of gravity, quantum mechanics, and spacetime. In every corner of modern physics, Max Planck's name is a Bicona constant reminder of where science has come from and where it might go. A life measured by principles. Looking back, Max Planck's life can be seen not only in Nobel medals and fundamental constants, but in values. Discipline. He was precise in thought, rigorous in method, and tireless in pursuit of truth. Humility. Despite revolutionizing physics, Planck never saw himself as a rebel or prophet. Resilience. He endured the death of his children, the collapse of his country, and the persecution of science with a resolve few could match. Conscience. He remained loyal to truth above party or power, speaking when it mattered most. Einstein once remarked that Planck was one of the noblest men I ever knew. His students remembered him not just as a teacher of physics, but as a teacher of life. Planck's voice to the future. In one of his last public addresses, Planck spoke to young scientists about the journey of discovery. The path of scientific progress is not one of ease or popularity. It is the path of those who search for truth, even when it is inconvenient, even when it brings them no reward. But in that truth is something eternal. These words echo even knowing labs, classrooms, observatories, and experiments around the world. From quantum computers to particle accelerators, from cosmology to neuroscience, the spirit of Max Planck is everywhere. He died in a ruined Germany, but he left behind a blueprint for the universe. Part 5. The Philosophy of Max Planck, Faith, Reason, and the Mystery of Existence. The physicist as philosopher, to understand Max Planck fully, is to look not only at the equations he wrote, but at the beliefs he held. Though the father of quantum theory, Planck never saw science as a cold or mechanical pursuit. Instead, he viewed it as a bridge to something deeper, a glimpse into the eternal harmony of existence. Unlike some of his contemporaries, Planck saw no contradiction between science and spirituality. In fact, he believed that the two were intertwined in their search for truth. In lectures, letters, and public addresses, Planck often spoke about faith, ethics, and the mystery of the universe not as an escape from science, but as its complement. Both religion and science require a belief in God. For believers, God is in the beginning, and for physicists, he is at the end of all considerations. This conviction made Planck not only a founder of modern physics, but also one of its most thoughtful philosophers. The nature of reality. One of Planck's central concerns was the question, what is real? Classical physics had suggested a world of objects and determinism. But quantum mechanics, ironically initiated by Planck himself, revealed a world far stranger, where particles could exist in multiple states, where outcomes depended on observation, and where certainty gave way to probability. Planck remained cautious. He didn't leap to wild interpretations. To him, the strange behavior of atoms and photons did not mean the world was an illusion, but that human understanding was limited. He believed in a real universe, governed by laws, even if those laws were probabilistic or obscured from direct perception. In private writings, he suggested that consciousness might play a deeper role in shaping experience to know because the universe was mental, but because the observer was never separate from what was being observed. On the existence of God, though not a theologian, Planck's views on God were deeply personal and unwavering. Raised in a Lutheran family and educated in Kantian ethics, he maintained a lifelong belief in a creative intelligence that underlies the universe. But he did not imagine God as an old man in the sky. Instead, God to Planck was a principle of order, purpose, and unity, the source of the laws that govern matter and energy. He once said, "Science cannot solve the ultimate mystery of nature because in the final analysis, we ourselves are part of the mystery we are trying to solve." In Planck's view, science reveals how the universe works, while faith asks why it exists at all. He saw no contradiction between being a devout believer and a rigorous scientist. He rejected atheism, which he believed was often built on the same dogmatism as blind faith. To him, humility was the highest virtue of both scientist and seeker. Free will and determinism, the rise of quantum mechanics, challenged the age-old notion of determinism. If particles could behave unpredictably, was the universe still a clockwork machine? And if not, was there room for free will? Planck approached this question cautiously. He did not believe in total determinism, nor did he endorse chaotic randomness. Instead, he believed that the apparent uncertainty of quantum phenomena pointed to hidden structures, laws not yet discovered. As for free will, Planck believed that human consciousness was not reducible to mere physical processes. While he accepted that the brain obeyed physical laws, he left room for moral responsibility and individual choice. He argued that values, such as justice, love, and beauty, were real though not quantifiable, and he insisted that science must remain humble before such mysteries. Ethics and the scientific life, Planck believed that science was more than the pursuit of knowledge, it was a moral endeavor. Throughout his life, he upheld values of truth, integrity, modesty, and courage. He opposed Nazi ideology, defended persecuted colleagues, and maintained a strict code of academic ethics. He warned against the misuse of science for political or military ends. Even as nuclear physics advanced and his own theories were used to develop atomic weapons, Planck remained committed to peaceful, humanistic science. He taught his students that the character of the scientist mattered as much as the discoveries made. Science advances only when its practitioners are honest. Truth cannot be served by ambition, by ideology, or by fear. His ethical stance was not loud, but it was firm. In a world that embraced extremes, Planck embodied moderation and moral clarity. Music, nature, and the soul. Outside the lab, Planck found solace in the natural world and in music, particularly classical composers like Bach, Mozart, and Brahms. He believed that music, like science, revealed patterns too profound for words. He once said, "Music gives expression to that which lies beyond the reach of spoken language, like a formula written in notes rather than equations." Planck often spent holidays in the Alps, hiking, reading philosophy, and listening to the silence of the mountains. He believed that beauty was not an accident, that the harmony found in nature was evidence of deeper truths. To him, aesthetics, ethics, and physics were all connected. They were expressions of an underlying order, of a cosmos that, though mysterious, was not meaningless. Planck's final message to humanity. In his later years, as Germany fell into war and darkness, Planck became a kind of moral elder, writing letters, giving interviews, and quietly warning against the dangers of arrogance and division. His final writings were tinged with sadness but also hope. He had seen the worst of human nature, but also its capacity for insight, compassion, and renewal. In one of his last public statements, he wrote, "Science progresses through mistakes, through doubt, through the willingness to be wrong. Let us not fear what we do not yet understand, but let us seek it humbly together." He died not knowing what would become of Germany or of quantum theory, but his words remain a call for truth without dogma, for courage without cruelty, and for a world where science and faith are not enemies, but partners in wonder. Part 6. The World After Planck. His enduring influence in modern science and technology. The quantum era takes hold. When Max Planck passed away in 1947, his quantum hypothesis had already blossomed into a full-blown revolution. But the world was only beginning to grasp how deeply and broadly his work would shape the coming centuries. In the decades that followed, the basic principles he uncovered became foundational to atomic structure and chemistry, nuclear energy, semiconductors, and electronics, laser technology, quantum field theory, computational physics, modern cosmology. Planck's tiny constant, once just a mysterious mathematical fix, had become the key to unlocking the invisible architecture of the universe. The 20th century was a time of astonishing scientific advancement, and nearly all of it flowed through the quantum doorway that Planck had first cracked open, the atom tamed. One of the earliest and most profound applications of quantum theory was the atomic model. Niels Bohr's 1913 atomic model, built directly on Planck's quantization idea, introducing energy levels for electrons. Quantum mechanics later explained the behavior of electrons in atoms and molecules, why chemical bonds form, why elements have specific spectra, why matter is stable. This led to a quantum understanding of the periodic table, molecular interactions, and all of modern chemistry. Without Planck's constant, there is no modern atomic theory or understanding of the atom, no periodic table, no molecular biology, no pharmaceuticals, quantum mechanics, and field theory. Planck's notion of quantized energy laid the groundwork for a new mechanics, developed by Werner Heisenberg, matrix mechanics, Erwin Schrödinger, wave mechanics, Paul Dirac, quantum field theory. Together, they formulated the mathematical laws that govern the quantum world. These laws are the basis for quantum electrodynamics, QED, and the Standard Model of particle physics. In these equations, Planck's constant h appears everywhere. It determines the scale of quantum effects, the structure of particles, the limits of measurement. Modern physics especially, at the subatomic level, is impossible to imagine without Planck's insight. Birth of the nuclear age. Though Max Planck was not directly involved in nuclear physics, his work was critical to it. Understanding atomic energy levels led directly to the discovery of nuclear fission, splitting the atom, nuclear fusion, power of the sun, the binding energy of atomic nuclei. These discoveries culminated in the creation of atomic weapons during World War II, the development of nuclear power plants, the understanding of stellar processes and the life cycle of stars. While Planck was deeply troubled by the militarization of science, he recognized that quantum physics had opened Pandora's box. His discovery gave humanity enormous power and, with it, enormous responsibility. The digital revolution and semiconductors, perhaps the most practical and far-reaching application of quantum theory, lies in modern electronics. Semiconductors, the basis of all computer chips, depend entirely on quantum mechanics. Transistors, diodes, LEDs, and solar cells all function because of quantum tunneling, band gaps, and electron behavior at the atomic level. Planck's constant governs these interactions. Without it, we could not design the devices that run computers, smartphones, satellites, and the internet. The entire digital world owes its existence to the quantum revolution and therefore to Max Planck. Lasers, MRI, and quantum optics. Another field transformed by quantum theory is optics, the study of light. Lasers work by stimulating electrons to emit photons in a coherent wave, something only possible with a quantum understanding of light. Magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, uses quantum spin states of nuclei to produce high-resolution images of soft tissue. Quantum optics allows researchers to manipulate individual photons for encryption, sensors, and communications. Planck's work led to a vision of light not just as a wave, but as a stream of quantized particles of breakthrough that made all of this possible. Quantum information and computing. We are now entering a new era that Planck could never have imagined, but that bears his fingerprints in every qubit. Quantum computing, the next frontier of information processing, is based entirely on the behavior of particles at the quantum level. Qubits store data as superpositions of 0 and 1. Quantum entanglement allows instant correlation of particles over vast distances. Quantum gates perform calculations that are exponentially faster than classical computers. The Planck constant is used in the design and calibration of every quantum computer. It defines the energy transitions, the time evolution, and the uncertainty at play in each operation. Max Planck's legacy now shapes the most cutting-edge tools of the 21st century and may lead us to an entirely new form of intelligence. Planck and the origin of the universe. Planck's work also echoes through the cosmos. The early universe was governed by quantum effects. The Planck epoch, the first 10 meniscud seconds after the Big Bang, is named after him. The Planck length defines the smallest meaningful distance in spacetime. In 2009, the European Space Agency launched the Planck satellite, which mapped the cosmic microwave background radiation, a snapshot of the universe just 380,000 years after the Big Bang. Thanks to this mission, scientists refined their understanding of the universe's age, the composition of dark matter and dark energy, the inflationary period that preceded expansion. Planck's name now reaches to the furthest edges of time and space, education, and global inspiration. Max Planck's legacy is also institutional. The Max Planck Society, founded in 1948, is one of the world's most prestigious research networks. It supports over 80 institutes, thousands of scientists, and dozens of Nobel laureates. It promotes basic, curiosity-driven research, exactly the kind Planck championed. Through this society, Planck continues to inspire new generations of scientists in physics, biology, computer science, artificial intelligence, climate science, neuroscience. His name represents not just a man, but a vision of what science can be. Ethics in the age of power. As science advances, so too do the ethical challenges it brings. Quantum physics led to nuclear energy and weapons, surveillance technology, data-driven economies, artificial intelligence. Planck's personal ethics, belief in truth, humility, and moral responsibility are more relevant than ever. He believed that science must remain independent of ideology and commerce. In an age of disinformation and commodified research, his values serve as a compass. The scientist must never forget that he is a servant, not a master of truth. Planck's legacy in perspective. If one were to trace the roots of the 21st century's greatest technologies and discoveries, the path would wind back again and again to Max Planck. Every electron in a circuit, every photon in a laser, every qubit in a quantum computer, every Higgs boson in the collider, every equation probing the dawn of time, All of it is built on Planck's radical insight that energy is not continuous but quantized. What began as a mathematical fix became a new understanding of Naturon that shattered classical assumptions and opened a window into the fundamental workings of reality. Part 7. Biographical Timeline, Honors and Personal Anecdotes. Max Planck, A Chronological Journey. To truly understand the evolution of Max Planck from child prodigy to the father of quantum theory, it helps to walk through the timeline of his life. The following chronology provides a structured look at how history, personal milestones, and scientific milestones intertwined in his journey. 1858, birth in Kiel, the 23rd of April. Max Karl Ernst Ludwig Planck is born in Kiel, Duchy of Holstein, then part of the German Confederation. Born into a family of lawyers and academics, especially influenced by his father, a law professor. 1867, moved to Munich. The Planck family relocates to Munich when Max is 9. He enrolls in the Maximilians Gymnasium, where he excels in mathematics and classical studies. 1874, 1879, university studies. Begins studies at the University of Munich at age 16. Transfers briefly to the University of Berlin for exposure to Helmholtz and Kirchhoff. Returns to Munich and earns his doctorate in physics at age 21 with a thesis on thermodynamics. Etusine a 1885 becomes associate professor at Kiel, appointed associate professor of theoretical physics at the University of Kiel, his first academic post. 1889, professor in Berlin. Succeeds Gustav Kirchhoff at the University of Berlin, eventually becoming a full professor and central figure in German physics. 1894, 1900, black body radiation studies begin, immerses himself in the problem of black body radiation. Proposes a new formula to resolve discrepancies in experimental data. The 14th of December, 1900, introduces the idea of energy quantith, official birth of quantum theory. 1909, death of first wife, Marie. Planck's first wife, Marie Merck, dies of tuberculosis, leaving him a widower with 4 children. He remarries later to Marga von Hoesslin. 1914, 1918, World War I, and personal loss. Signs the Manifesto of the 93 in support of Germany's involvement in WWI. 1916, his eldest son Karl Planck is killed in combat. His daughters Emma and Grete later died due to childbirth complications. 1918, Nobel Prize in Physics. Awarded the Nobel Prize for his discovery of energy quantization and blackbody radiation law. Recognized as a global scientific leader. 1930, President of the Kaiser Wilhelm Society. Becomes the head of Germany's most important scientific institution. Navigates ethical minefields during the rise of the Nazi regime. 1933, 1945, rise of Nazism and moral crisis. Protests the dismissal of Jewish scientists. Meets Hitler to request moderation in science policy without success. His son Erwin joins the anti-Nazi resistance and is executed in 1945 following the failed 20th of July plot. 1947, death in Göttingen. Dies on the 4th of October, 1947 at the age of 89. Leaves behind a legacy that would continue to transform science for centuries. Honors and recognitions. Max Planck received numerous accolades during and after his lifetime. These include Nobel Prize in Physics, 1918. Max Planck Medal, 1929, established in his honor by the German Physical Society. Order of Merit, 1938, one of the highest civilian honors in Germany. Max Planck Society, founded in 1948 to succeed the Kaiser Wilhelm Society. ESA's Planck satellite, 2009, named in his honor for mapping the early universe. Planck units, Planck epoch, Planck length, and Planck constant, all named after him and used universally in modern physics. His name appears in textbooks, spacecraft, laboratories, and scientific literature across the world. Personal quotes and reflections. Max Planck left behind not just scientific formulas, but wisdom. Here are some of his most powerful and lasting reflections. Science cannot solve the ultimate mystery of nature because, in the final analysis, we ourselves are part of the mystery. A new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. We must be clear that when it comes to atoms, language can be used only as in poetry. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. These quotes reflect a physicist with philosophical depth, a scientist who saw his work as part of a broader, spiritual, human story. Personal anecdotes and insights. Some lesser-known stories offer a more intimate view of Planck, the humble professor. Despite being a Nobel laureate, Planck continued teaching basic physics courses into his 80s. He believed teaching was a moral duty. Musical genius, he was a gifted pianist and loved Brahms. He once performed piano duets with Einstein, who admired him both scientifically and musically. The Winter Walks. Even in old age, Planck would walk for hours in the snow, composing philosophical reflections and humming melodies from memory. The Secret Letters. Many of Planck's letters to his children reveal a tender, deeply emotional man who hid grief behind discipline and logic. Final Wishes. Planck asked that no monuments be erected in his honor. He believed his work should speak for itself. Part 8. Max Planck and his relevance today in education, technology, and global culture. Planck in the 21st century, a timeless influence. Over 75 years after his death, Max Planck remains more relevant than ever. In a world dominated by rapid technological innovation, rising ethical concerns, and a renewed interest in fundamental questions about reality, Planck's voice is soft, precise, and philosophical still echoes. His legacy is not just confined to laboratories and blackboards. It influences how we teach science, how we develop technology, how we think about existence, and how we balance knowledge with ethics. Planck's name may be etched into constants and equations, but his true power lies in how deeply he changed our perception of nature. Planck's constant in the modern world. Planck's constant 6.6260701 5 times 10 minus 34 J's is no longer just a theoretical curiosity. It is now part of the International System of Units. In 2019, the kilogram long defined by a physical object in Paris officially redefined using Planck's constant. This moment symbolized the shift from material standards to natural constants. It means that Planck's constant now plays a role in scientific experiments, industrial precision measurements, quantum-based technologies. Even your smartphone camera and satellite navigation systems owe their accuracy to instruments that rely on quantum metrology, all anchored to Planck's legacy. Education and scientific literacy. In classrooms around the world, Planck's work is a gateway to critical thinking and creativity. Teachers use the story of quantum theory's birth to show how even the greatest minds struggle with uncertainty, encourage scientific humility, teach that mystery is not failure, but an invitation to deeper understanding. Educational philosophy rooted in Planck's approach emphasizes inquiry over memorization, skepticism balanced by respect for evidence, the unity of math, science, and philosophy. His emphasis on ethics, character, and perseverance remains a model for educators globally. Artificial intelligence and the quantum future. Planck likely never imagined artificial intelligence yet today. AI intersects deeply with quantum theory. Quantum computing is expected to accelerate AI learning and problem solving. Quantum models are used to simulate complex systems materials, molecules, and even neural networks. Planck-scale computing, theoretical, pushes toward the boundaries of reality itself. Researchers and futurists now ponder whether Planck's principles may hold the key to unlocking conscious machines, new physical dimensions, or post-human intelligence. In these debates, his values remain critical: caution, humility, and the belief that science must serve humanity, not dominate it. The Max Planck Society in the 21st century. The Max Planck Society continues to lead the world in scientific research. More than 80 institutes across Germany and the world, thousands of researchers, from physics and biology to sociology and law. A focus on curiosity-driven research, free from commercial or political pressure. Recent Planck Institute achievements include advancements in brain-computer interfaces, discoveries in genome editing, CRISPR, contributions to climate modeling and sustainable energy solutions. Its guiding philosophy remains Planck's: pursue truth, support talent, and uphold ethical responsibility. Planck and global cultural memory. Planck's name is remembered across cultures not just as a scientist, but as a symbol of order amidst chaos, conscience amidst corruption, truth amidst ideology. His story is told in physics, documentaries, and educational videos, public exhibitions and museum displays, university lecture halls, and memorial symposia. In Germany, he is seen as a national treasure. Globally, he is part of the pantheon of universal thinkers, those whose work transcends time, nation, and language. Ethical dilemmas in scientific progress. As we venture into gene editing, AI warfare, and data-driven surveillance, Planck's personal struggles offer a blueprint. He tried to work from within a corrupt regime while protecting science. He resisted totalitarian control without grandstanding. He believed in moral duty beyond political loyalty. These lessons are vital today. Science does not exist in a vacuum. Planck's life teaches us that scientists must be ethical actors, not just technical experts. That truth must be pursued even when it is inconvenient or dangerous. What would Planck say today? If Planck were alive today, what would he say about AI and consciousness? Likely, understand the limits of logic. Do not rush to conclusions. The mind remains a mystery. Climate change and sustainability? Likely. We are part of the system we study. Responsibility must match knowledge. The digital age and misinformation? Likely. Truth is fragile and must be protected not by force, but by integrity. His timeless message would be, in all things, seek truth, serve humanity, and never forget that we are not above the laws of nature. We are a part of them. Conclusion: the man who measured the unmeasurable. Max Planck didn't set out to change the world. He wasn't flamboyant like Einstein, rebellious like Feynman, or mystical like Bohr. He was methodical, principled, and exacting. And yet by proposing a single equation, he altered the course of human history. He helped us see that energy comes in quanta. That matter is not what it seems. That truth lies deeper than appearances. More than that, he showed us how a scientist can live, with courage in the face of tyranny, with dignity in the face of loss, with humility in the face of nature. Max Planck did not just measure the immeasurable. He lived a life that reflected the harmony and mystery of the very universe he helped to reveal.